All right, so get ready because we are going deep on this one.
Oh, yeah,
This one is going to be fascinating but really disturbing.
definitely.
We're diving into the case of Armin Meiwes.
The Cannibal of Rotenburg.
Yeah, the Cannibal of Rotenburg, using the book Pasted Text
Wow.
as our guide. And, this is not your typical true crime story.
Right.
It really makes you think about human nature, like the dark side of what people want,
Absolutely.
and also how the internet can be used to connect people with, well, unique interests.
Yeah, and what's really interesting to me is how Meiwes seemed like a normal guy on the surface.
Right.
Just a computer technician living in Germany.
Early 2000s.
Right. But underneath, he had this really disturbing fantasy.
About eating another person.
Yeah, and this desire, it goes all the way back to his childhood.
It sounds like he was a very lonely kid,
Yeah.
like obsessed with Hansel and Gretel,
That's right.
which, if you think about it, is kind of about consuming another person.
It is, isn't it?
And then his parents got divorced, and he had this tough relationship with his mother.
His childhood is really important here.
Yeah.
I mean, it definitely doesn't excuse what he did, but it does give us some background.
Right, like how these desires might have developed.
Exactly, like he was searching for some kind of connection
Yeah.
in a really, really messed up way.
And it's interesting, the book says that his, cannibalistic urges actually subsided when he served in the army.
Make sense?
Maybe because of the camaraderie and the structure,
I think you're right.
but then they came back when he left.
Like, the army gave him that connection he was looking for, but only temporarily.
Right. And then, of course, we have the internet.
Yeah. And it was both a catalyst and a tool for him.
It really was.
He found all these online communities.
Cannibalism.
Yeah, he connected with like-minded individuals.
And even learned about butchering techniques online.
It's just crazy to think about how the internet, meant to connect people, could be used for something so dark.
It's terrifying, really.
It really is.
And his posts on the website Cannibal Cafe are chilling.
Oh, yeah.
He was explicitly looking for someone willing to be killed and eaten.
And he got hundreds of responses.
It's just shocking and disturbing at the same time.
It really is. But he insisted on consent, though.
He did.
He actually met with several potential victims.
But if they showed any hesitation, he backed off.
He did.
This brings up, a really complex issue.
Consent.
Yeah, about consent in these extreme situations.
The story of Dirk Moeller is a good example of this.
This was one potential victim.
Right. Moeller went to Meiwes' house, even let himself be chained up.
Wow.
But then at the last minute, he changed his mind, and Meiwes, to his credit, let him go.
This is a detail that really shows the complexity of Meiwes' psyche.
I think so, too.
He had this twisted sense of morality,
Right.
believing that if the victim consented, then it was okay.
Right. Which obviously raises a ton of ethical and legal questions.
For sure. And then that brings us to Bernd Jürgen Brandes.
The man who would become Meiwes' victim.
He also had a troubled past
He did.
and tragically seemed to want to die.
Yeah, and their online interactions are just chilling.
They are, like, really chilling.
They talked about everything, how Brandes would be killed, how his body would be prepared.
Wow.
It just shows how the internet can connect people with really niche, and in this case, really disturbing interests.
It's really terrifying.
Yeah. So on March 9th, 2001, Brandes traveled from Berlin to meet Meiwes at his farmhouse.
Wow.
And what happened there, the whole disturbing event was actually caught on video.
Oh, wow.
This recording became a key piece of evidence in the case.
It must have been tough to watch.
Oh, absolutely. Incredibly disturbing stuff.
Could imagine.
But it really highlights how complicated consent was in this whole situation.
Yeah, the events of that night are really tough to talk about, but we need to understand what happened.
Definitely.
Meiwes and Brandes actually shared a meal of Brandes' amputated penis.
Right. And as horrific as that is, it makes you think about Meiwes' motivations.
Like, what was going through his mind?
Was it about control? Was it some twisted way of connecting with Brandes?
Or something else entirely?
Exactly.
That's a huge question, right?
Absolutely. It's one of the biggest ethical dilemmas here.
Can someone actually consent to being killed and eaten?
And what role did Brandes' own mental state play in all this?
It's a moral and philosophical minefield.
For sure. No easy answers here.
And the book mentions that Brandes asked for sleeping pills and cough medicine to dull his senses.
Almost like he was preparing himself for what was about to happen.
Right. Makes you wonder about his mental state and if he was really in control.
It really does, and it makes you question if there was any manipulation going on from UA's side.
Even if it wasn't intentional.
Exactly. But even with Brandes seemingly willing, The book says that Meiwes hesitated.
Really?
He really struggled with it, even prayed for guidance before he actually killed Brandis.
Wow. So it wasn't just a cold, calculated act for Meiwes.
No, not at all.
There was some internal conflict going on.
It seems like taking a human life, even for someone with these desires, wasn't easy.
Makes you think about the psychological complexity of it all.
It really does. And then the way he butchered Brandis's body so methodically.
And stored the flesh in his freezer?
Yeah, all of that points to something deeper.
Like what?
Maybe it was about keeping a trophy.
A way to hold on to that connection he felt with Brandis.
By consuming his flesh, it's disturbing, but it gives us a glimpse into Meiwes' mind.
It wasn't just about hunger for him.
No, definitely not.
It was about fulfilling this dark fantasy he'd had for years.
His twisted desire for intimacy and connection, and the internet plays a role again here.
How so?
Meiwes went back to Cannibal Cafe looking for another victim.
Oh, no.
And it was actually through his posts there that an Austrian student,
Someone who saw his post.
yeah, he got suspicious and contacted the authorities.
So that's how they found out about everything.
Exactly. The police raided Meiwes' farmhouse and found the horrifying truth.
Brandis remains in the freezer.
And that video recording.
The trial must have been unlike anything anyone had ever seen before.
It was a landmark case.
Because cannibalism wasn't even illegal in Germany at the time.
Right. It presented some real legal challenges.
What were some of those challenges?
Well, the whole case revolved around morality, consent, and the limits of personal freedom.
It's mind-boggling.
Meiwes actually argued that he was just fulfilling Brandis's wishes,
Wow.
while the prosecution argued that you can't consent to your own death and consumption.
It's hard to even imagine the arguments that were made in that courtroom.
I know. And in the end, Meiwes was convicted of manslaughter.
Really?
It was considered a light sentence for what he did.
Yeah, I can imagine there was some outrage over that.
Oh, absolutely. There was a huge public outcry, which led to a retrial.
And then what happened?
He was convicted of murder and sentenced to life in prison.
That's wild. It's like the legal system wasn't prepared for something like this.
Right, like this whole case exposed a gap in the law.
It makes you wonder how many other laws are out there that need updating.
Especially with technology constantly evolving, you know?
Yeah, exactly. And the internet, this whole case really brought to light how the internet can be used for these horrible things.
It definitely did.
It showed how these online communities can be so dangerous.
Yeah, how connections that seem harmless can turn into something truly awful.
This whole deep dive has been, I don't know, a real journey into the darkest parts of human nature.
It really has.
It's given me a lot to think about, that's for sure.
That's what we're here for, right?
I guess, this case with Armin Meiwes, it's still relevant today.
Oh, absolutely.
It makes us face these uncomfortable truths about ourselves.
About the world we live in, yeah.
It makes you question everything, like what are the limits of personal freedom?
And the responsibility that comes with it.
And what about consent?
Right. Even if Brandis was willing, does that mean Meiwes is off the hook?
Where do we draw the line?
Between choice and protecting people from harm.
Especially in extreme cases like this.
This case really highlights those gray areas.
It does, and with technology advancing so quickly, connecting us in ways we never thought possible, how do we make sure those connections don't lead to more tragedies like this?
That's a question we all need to think about, you know?
Like, what are the ethical boundaries we need to be aware of online?
Exactly. Because this case is a stark reminder that the internet can be used for good.
But it has this dark side, too.
We can't ignore it.
It's a reminder that we have to be aware, to think critically about what we see online.
To be mindful of the potential consequences of our actions online, right?
Exactly. We can't just pretend that the darker side of human nature doesn't exist.
And we can't forget that the digital age can amplify those impulses.
Well, that brings our deep dive into the disturbing case of Armin Meiwes to a close.
It's a story that really makes you think, doesn't it?
It does. It makes you think about human desire, about the power of technology, and the ethical questions that come up when personal freedom clashes with keeping people safe.
And as we move forward in this digital world, it's a story that reminds us to be critical thinkers.
To be ethically aware.
And to keep talking about personal responsibility in a world where we're all so connected.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive, and we'll see you next time.
See you then.